"Give me the one they call useless," said the Duke of Lascelles. 10 young ladies in white stood in a line down the length of the long gallery, with their mothers ranged behind them like artillery. And not one of them moved, because not one of them understood that he had not meant any of the 10. Rowan Vaux, 3rd Duke of Lascelles, had arrived at his aunt's house 2 hours before he was expected, which was the only genuinely clever thing he did that week. He had come because he had no choice. His father's will, a document composed by a vindictive man on the last afternoon of his life, provided that his sister Orlia's £12,000 should be paid on the day her brother married, and not 1 hour before. Orlia was 26. She had been engaged for 4 years to a curate with £80 a year and a great deal of patience, and she had never once, in 4 years, asked Rowan to do anything about it. So Rowan had written to his aunt Lady Manwaring and said, "Find me a wife by Michaelmas." And his aunt, who enjoyed nothing in the world so much as arranging other people, had invited 10 eligible young women and their mothers to Renfield for a week, and had described it in her letter as a small autumn party, which nobody in 3 counties believed for a moment. He came up the back way from the stables at 11 in the morning, in his riding coat, unannounced, because he wanted a half-hour of quiet before it began. He got as far as the door of the small drawing-room. It stood open. Inside, the 10 were rehearsing. He listened for 11 minutes, standing in the passage with his hat in his hand, and heard a great deal. He heard that he was 39 and had a temper. He heard that his hand was scarred from the fire at Lascelles 9 years ago, and that one of them thought it would be tolerable if he wore gloves at dinner. He heard a wager laid, in shillings, on which of them would be Duchess by Christmas. He heard a mother say of him that a man of that description would be quite manageable if one did not mind the face. And then he heard a commotion at the far window, somebody's groom shouting in the yard below, and a voice said, "Oh, it is only the boy who does the traces. He has been kicked, I think. How very tiresome, we shall have no carriage this afternoon." And another voice said, "Kicked where? Somebody go down." "Faith, don't be absurd, you cannot." "Then I shall be absurd. Hold these." A quantity of shawls hit a chair. Rowan stepped back into the shadow of a pillar as a young woman came out of that room at a very unladylike pace, gray stuff gown. No jewelry, sleeves already pushed up, her hair coming down at one side, and went past him without seeing him at all, and down the service stair 3 steps at a time. He waited. Nobody followed her. "Who was that?" he asked the footman on the landing. The footman had the good sense not to lie. "Miss Mildmay, your Grace, her ladyship's companion. She is a connection of the family on the Mildmay side." "Is she one of the 10? The footman's face did something complicated. "No, your Grace. Miss Mildmay is, her ladyship keeps her for the letters and the accounts and the shawls. The young ladies call her," he stopped. "Go on." "They call her the useless one, your Grace, on account of she does not sing, nor draw, nor play, and she has a fortune of nothing at all, and she reads a great deal, which they consider a waste." Rowan went down to the stable yard. He stood in the arch and watched, for a quarter of an hour, a woman in a gray stuff gown kneel on wet cobbles in the muck with a boy's leg across her knees, cutting the boot off with a farrier's knife, because the swelling would not let it come, talking the whole time in a low, steady voice about absolutely nothing. The weather, a dog she had known, the price of apples, while the head groom held the boy's shoulders, and the boy stopped screaming and started listening. She got the boot off. She said, "Straight break below the knee, and it will mend if it is set today. Send to Prude for the bone setter and tell him Lady Manwaring will pay, and if he argues, tell him she will pay double for haste." She sat back on her heels in the muck and said to the boy, You will be walking by Christmas, and you will have a limp for a month, and you will make the most shocking use of it." Then she looked up and saw the Duke of Lascelles standing in the arch. She got to her feet. Her hem was ruined to the knee, and her hands were filthy, and there was a smear of something across her cheekbone, and she looked at him with the frank, unhurried steadiness of a woman who had used up all her fear on something that mattered. "Your Grace, you are early." "I am," said Rowan. "What is your name?" "Faith Mildmay." "Miss Mildmay." He found, to his considerable annoyance, that his voice was not entirely under his control. "Do you know why I have come to Renfield?" "Everyone in the house knows why you have come to Renfield. There are 10 of them, and they are all in white." "And what do you think of that?" Faith Mildmay looked at her ruined hem, and then at him and said, "I think that a man who orders a wife by the dozen and takes the one who curtsies best deserves precisely what he gets, and I think that you did not order it, because you have the face of a man carrying out somebody else's sentence." She wiped her hands on her apron. "I also think that if you keep those 10 standing in the gallery much longer, one of them will faint on purpose, and it will not be the one you want." Rowan went up the back stair, put on a coat, and walked into the long gallery at noon precisely, where 10 young ladies in white stood in a line with their mothers ranged behind them. His aunt sailed forward radiant. "Lascelles, now may I present?" "Aunt," he looked down the length of that line, and every one of them dipped in order like a row of very expensive dominoes. "Where is Miss Mildmay?" Lady Manwaring blinked. Faith is, she will be in the stable yard of all places over some boy." "Send for her." "Lascelles." "Give me the one they call useless," said the Duke of Lascelles, into the loudest silence Renfield had ever produced. "The rest of you have my sincere thanks, my carriages at your disposal, and my recommendation that you settle the wager in the small drawing-room among yourselves, since I understand it stood at 11 shillings. He was married to Faith Mildmay 3 weeks later. It was not, he was aware, a courtship. It was a rescue conducted at speed for the benefit of a curate in Northumberland, and Faith herself said so on the second day, in Lady Manwaring's morning-room with the door open. "Your Grace, I must be sure you understand what you are doing. You do not know me. You saw me set a bone and be rude to you, and you have concluded a great deal from very little, which is exactly what those 10 girls did about your temper. I am aware. Your sister's £12,000 is the whole of it, and I shall not pretend otherwise, and neither should you." "It is not the whole of it," Rowan said, "but it is enough of it that I will not lie to you. Miss Mildmay, I need a wife by Michaelmas. You have no fortune, no protector, and a position in this house that ends the day my aunt tires of you. I am offering you a bad bargain honestly instead of a good one dishonestly. If you would rather not, say so now, and I will settle 400 a year on you regardless and go and marry one of the 10, and neither of us will ever speak of it again." Faith Mildmay was quiet for a long moment. 400 a year regardless," she repeated. "You would do that?" "It is drawn up. It was drawn up yesterday." "Then," she said, "I shall marry you, your Grace, and not for the 400. But I give you fair warning that I shall want to know why. Not today, but I shall ask." They were married at Lascelles on the 28th of September, and Orlia's £12,000 was paid to her curate's trustees on the 29th, and the pair of them were married themselves before the leaves were off. On his own wedding night, the Duke of Lascelles walked his wife the length of the west corridor, opened the door of the Duchess's apartments, put a branch of candles into her hand, said, "Good night, Faith. Ring for anything at all," and went away down the corridor to his own rooms. He did not look back. If he had looked back, he would have seen what stayed with him afterwards for a week. Her face in the candlelight, going carefully, deliberately blank. He had thought it was the decent thing. He had rehearsed the reasoning for 3 weeks, and it had seemed unanswerable. She had married a stranger at 19 days' notice, with 400 a year in one hand and no protector in the world, and he would be a poor sort of man to walk through that door on the strength of a bargain. So he had shut it himself, from the outside, without a word of explanation, because he was 39 years old and had never in his life explained himself to anyone. For 6 days Lascelles was very courteous and extremely cold. She breakfasted with him. She asked intelligent questions about the estate. She went through the household books with the steward and found £11 a year going out for a laundry that had been closed since the fire. She was faultless, and she was somewhere else entirely, and twice he came into a room and she stood up as though he were a caller. On the 6th night, he found her in the library at 1 in the morning with her hair in a plait and a shawl over her nightgown, doing accounts. "You should be asleep." "I do not sleep much." She did not look up. "I never have. It is one of the useless things about me." Rowan shut the door. "Faith, look at me." She put down the pen. When she did look up, her eyes were perfectly dry and perfectly steady, and there was something in them that he had last seen in the stable yard on the boy's face before she began talking about the price of apples. "I have made a mistake," Rowan said, "and I have taken 6 days to find it, and I am now going to say a great deal at once badly, and you must let me get to the end." "Very well. On our wedding night, I left you at that door because I could not bring myself to be a man who bought a wife by the dozen and collected on the same evening. You said it to me yourself in the stable yard. A man who orders a wife and takes the one who curtsies best deserves what he gets. I have thought about that sentence every day since. I did not want a single hour of this marriage to be something you had paid for with your only remaining property." He drew breath. "And I never said so, because I have not explained myself to a living soul since my father died. And so what I actually did was walk a bride to a door on her wedding night and shut it in her face without a word. Which is not honor, Faith. It is the same rudeness in better clothes." Faith Mildmay sat quite still, with her hand flat on the ledger. "I thought," she said, "that you had looked at me properly at last." "I had looked at you properly in the stable yard. I thought you had got me home and seen the hem and the hands and the no fortune and the not singing and not drawing, and had done the arithmetic, and had concluded that they were right, and that the useless one was the useless one after all, and that you had bought her because she was cheap and available by Michaelmas." Her voice did not rise at all, which made it very much worse. "And I decided that I would be so excellent at the accounts, and the tenants, and the shawls that you would never regret the price. I have been 6 days making that decision, Rowan, and I made it very thoroughly. And now you have come in at 1 in the morning and undone the whole thing, and I find I mind it dreadfully." Rowan crossed the library and knelt down on the hearthrug beside her chair, which put his scarred hand in the firelight where she could see it, and he did not move it away. "You asked me at Renfield why," he said. "You said you would ask, and you have not asked, so I shall tell you unasked. 11 minutes before I saw you I stood in a passage, and listened to 10 women and 5 mothers discuss my hand, my temper, and my face, and lay a wager in shillings on which of them would have me by Christmas. And then a groom's boy was kicked in the yard, and every soul in that room said how tiresome, and one person put down an armful of shawls and went. That is why." He looked up at her. "I did not choose the woman who was kind, Faith. Kindness is cheap in a drawing-room. I chose the only one who moved." There was a very long silence, in which a coal shifted. "Say the rest," Faith said unevenly. "I have been married to you for 6 days, and I have wanted to knock on that door every one of the 6 nights. said the Duke of Lascelles, "and I am not going to knock on it tonight either, because I have decided that we shall do this the wrong way round. I intend to court my own wife, properly and slowly, and in front of witnesses, until the day comes when you can look me in the face and tell me you would have had me with no £12,000 and no Michaelmas and no 400 a year. And on that day, faith, you may knock on my door, and I shall hear it if I am at the far end of the county." Faith put out her hand and laid it against his scarred one, on the arm of the chair, and closed her fingers. "That," she said, "is the most maddening and the most beautiful thing anyone has ever said to me. Go to bed, your grace." So he courted her. It was the strangest winter of his life and the happiest. He took her to Lascelles village on market day, and let the whole parish see him carry her basket. He gave her the estate accounts entire, and by February she had found £91 and reorganized the coppice rotation, and the steward, who had begun by addressing all his answers to the Duke, had begun addressing them to her. He had the old dairy fitted up as a surgery, with a stove and a table and a locked cupboard, because she could set a bone and the county had nobody nearer than Prude, and by March she was known for 30 miles and had been fetched out of bed 9 times. He learned that she did not sing because her mother had once told her at 11 that her voice was unpleasant and had said it in front of people, and that she had never sung a note since. He learned that she read Greek, badly and passionately, out of a battered book she had bought for 4pence. He learned that she had been at Renfold 9 years and had never had a room with a fire. On the 14th of April, he was quite certain of the date afterwards, and so was she. The household woke to a great deal of noise in the west corridor, and the Duke of Lascelles came out of his own door at midnight in his shirt-sleeves, to find his wife standing there with a candle in one hand and a battered 4-penny Greek book in the other, absolutely furious with him. "You have been at the far end of the county for 3 days," she said, "and I have knocked twice already, and you were not in it." Rowan looked at her for a moment. Then he took the candle out of her hand and set it on the sill, and told her in a voice not remotely steady that he had heard her. The door closed. The corridor went dark. Mrs. Verrall, the housekeeper, coming up the back stair with a warming pan and a great deal of tact, turned round and went down again. There is not a great deal more to tell, and what there is ordinary, which is the whole point of it. 10 young ladies who had once stood in white in a long gallery, all married perfectly well, and one of them, who had been the one to say kicked where, "Somebody go down," became a lifelong friend of the Duchess of Lascelles and stood godmother to her eldest. The wager money, 11 shillings, arrived at Lascelles in a folded paper that Christmas with no name on it. Faith spent it on a hymn book for a joke, and then learned to sing out of it in the dairy where nobody could hear. And one evening in her 31st year, Rowan came in quietly and stood in the doorway and listened to the whole of it and never told her. And whenever anyone at a table asked the Duke how he had come to choose his Duchess out of so remarkable a field, Rowan Vaux would put down his glass and say, with perfect truth and no explanation whatever, that 10 of them had stood still, and 1 of them had moved.